Eight, eight, eight. No, it was 9-1. I'm gonna say 31. Oh, hey, 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 hey. Just I'm just trying to do a little bit of multitasking because my computer has been like lagging or slow this morning, and I've been trying to get on here for a minute, and I am finally here. So greetings and happy Friday, as Winnie would say. Happy Friday. I am so excited to be here as always. I hope you have had a fabulous week. We are ending out this week and ending it strong, and just all is well. I am, I get so I love to say, just like other people say, that there are so many things. Good morning, Ruth, darling. There are so many things that happen to us when we are called to learn some lessons in life. It seems as though everything shows up to kind of like make sure that we get that message, like to solidify it, to like just kind of kind of sear it in. Good morning, grand risings to you, Nirvana. I heard you had an excellent event, and yeah, I've been seeing some pictures, and so yay, congratulations to you on the inaugural um what is it, dinner de blanc, I think it is, but congratulations on that. So yeah, we get to sear this in, this stuff through the experiences that happen. So if, say for instance, what I do in my home life or on my cushion is like me sitting in an audience and learning, then what happens when I go out into the world is something that just kind of sears it in. It becomes you got one period where you're in the classroom, and then you got another period where you're doing the labs. So you go to the classroom, you learn the theory, you learn about the stuff, and then you go out into the world and it becomes the lab. So whether the work is on forgiveness or just acceptance, I had this beautiful I actually, when I read Ilhan Omar's book, This Is What America Looks Like, I was so moved by her messages around her faith, right? I was moved by that. I highlighted all the areas that I just thought were just amazing, because it gave me some insight into what she believed, right? And just her level of activism in the world, all of that stuff. And so as I was doing or working on my radio show the other day, I don't know if I mentioned this, but as I was working on my radio show the other day, I had to revisit it. So I got the book from the library again, and this time on my Kindle, and I could look and, just copy some of the things that were in there that I really wanted to recall or remember. And so one of the things that I was struck by was this desire to, to be responsible for yourself and not, act as if you are the police of the universe. And so, one of the things that she talked about is that God is not going to ask me to answer for you what you do, what you don't do, whether you ever reconcile with your parents, or whether you ever come to peace with your siblings or stuff. God is not going to ask me about your stuff. He's going to ask about my own. And this is not to disembody God and act like this is some way station that we meet, but rather a dialogue that goes on the interior of us. You don't have to wait until what we call Judgment Day to have these experiences. As Dr. Brown would say, you get to take this into consideration nightly, right? So if you're thinking about this idea that our day ends at midnight, right, and a new one begins, it's like just even before you go to sleep, just kind of like reassessing, reevaluating what your day looked like. Were there times when you could have shown up better, or something that you could have done differently? And are there times when you opted for the cowardly route or for the courageous route? You can ask yourself this throughout the day. So yesterday I went to, I had a one of those days that was just like peaks and valleys, right? And just as sure as there was some highs, there was also some lows. And when I consider the part that I played, I could ask myself, you know what was I thinking in the moments when I had the lows, or what was I thinking when I had the highs? So I've been on this thing. Let me say this. I've been on this thing. I have sometimes some darling folks have told me that they use the television as their prayer list, right? If they don't have anything else to pray about, they turn on the TV, they watch the news, or they listen to a program or something like that. It's been their prayer list. Well, sometimes you turn on the TV and you see something that is awe-inspiring, or at least makes you think. So I have really been interested in the ways in which we show up in the world, right? I have this idea, and I've had it for a while, that everybody ought to celebrate the you that you are, right? Just do you. That means not sitting up and trying to conform to what is normal or what other people want you to do, but rather to be the full expression of who you are. Live in your authenticity, be bold, be free, all of that stuff. That's been my mantra since I was younger. And I remember trying to push the barriers on what was possible. But we don't always do that, especially not when it's other people. When other people, we sit up there and we look at them like, "Ooh, she ain't need to wear that." Or, like, does he know he has Dunlap disease or something like that? We get into all of these ideas and criticisms about other people without recognizing that it goes against the very principles that we want to hold true in our own life. So I've been lately, since I watched this, Lizzo had a special on where she was hiring dancers for her squad. And Lizzo is a big girl, right? And there is this thing of, when I say love your body the way that you are, that means not waiting until you're 130 pounds or 100 and whatever pounds, or until you get into the what did my girlfriend say, the wondrous club, right? The 100s, any 100. It's not that. It is where you are learning how to love yourself. So when Lizzo did this thing, I was really challenged. I really started challenging myself that no matter what, I was going to be an advocate for, not, for people showing up the way that they want to, and not body shaming, right? And so that means that in my space, wherever I am, I'm like, we're not doing that, right? Because I wherever I am, I want to be in a space of love and acceptance. And I work very hard at that. And so even the people that have been around me, I have been saying, we're not going to do that. Now, if I go back to Ilhan Omar's book, Ilhan Omar would say, be responsible for how you show up in the world and stop trying to, trying to make other people do or don't do. But I think that we do it so unconsciously. I've been calling people's attention to it. So yesterday when I go out to this event at the Historical Society. It's over on the Circle. So I go out and I forgot that they were doing this 1920s theme. And what does a 1920s theme look like for, Black women, right? So I go out to this event, entering into the lab, right? And I go in and I'm in this, what I thought was a very cute outfit, right? This yellow top, but the yellow top was low cut. And I had on a skirt that's about this color. I thought I was looking cute. And girl, why is the first person I come into, she was like, oh, cover all that up. I was like, whoa, back up. Back up. And she says to me after the initial encounter, she says to me, oh, you can curse me out about that later. I'm just so used to telling, right? So it was just an interesting event, an interesting encounter. And then like being in a space of, okay, this happened. I said my response, I said my piece, and then I let it go, right? Not holding anything on. And so one of the things that the Course in Miracles says is when you've forgiven something, it disappears. It no longer holds any kind of angst for you. And so what I know is that when we talk about this idea, sometimes we talk about boundaries, sometimes we talk about being above all of that, how we conduct ourselves. One of the things that I know is that for me, I like to be clear. Clarity is kind, right? Clarity is kind. Clear is kind. Unclear is unkind. And so when we have people in our life, we actually call them to, if they plan to be in our lives, we show them how we expect to be treated. And so, so I say all of that to say that this lab is awesome. I love that it works and that it works for each and every one of us to the degree that we submit ourselves to it and not cower away, right? So do you, and all the fabulous, wonderful things about you. Good morning, Sandra. How are you today? Grand risings, happy Friday, all of that good stuff. I am so thrilled that you made it. So we've been talking about this thing of our parents and whether or not we have rejected a parent. We talk about this idea of how we often repeat what we reject in our parents. We talked about so much as it relates to our parents. And so today, as we come here, we talk about this unconscious loyalty. Now, I see the title here and it says the unconscious loyalty to failure. And so it's really interesting because when you think about how you perceived your life growing up, when you think about the messages that you received, whether it was when it was bill pay time or how much you moved, your level of security with your own parents and your house. When it talks about failure, what we know in the Black community is that, especially when we were younger, there is this formative state that happened back in the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, where people were not on solid ground. And so sometimes this failure, even though it seems to be the truth, it has been it can be hijacked by the level of racism that people were under. And so no matter how hard parents may have tried at times, these times may not have lended themselves to experiencing the kind of comfort that we might have seen with, say, for instance, a different family, a white family, or some other family. So when we think about this term of failure in the Black community, we have to look at that in the full context, right? In the full context of everything that went on. And I just wanted to point that out, because a lot of times when we hear these terms, like I was talking about when we first started talking about success, what does success look like? And was that a thing back when we were growing up? Was it something that people were talking about? And is success about really just, what I got and nobody else's, whatever? All of that goes into this. So this unconscious loyalty to failure, I think, will be particularly interesting for all of us. He says, we don't need to reject our parents to repeat their misfortune. Sometimes we share an unconscious bond that keeps us mired in a similar experience. Despite our best efforts to succeed, we find ourselves unable to achieve more in our lives than they achieved in theirs. So if, for example, our father failed in business and wasn't able to provide financially for the family, we might unconsciously join him by failing in the same way. Ensnared in hidden loyalty, we might sabotage our success and make sure that we don't surpass him. Now, let me just put a little bookmark right there for just a second, because here's one of the things that sometimes I like to, well, I have many, y'all might heard me say before, I got a TV in my kitchen. And I love to turn on the TV as I'm cooking. And I like anybody else, I go to YouTube. And in YouTube, I'm watching or listening to, because it's not so much watching as I'm cooking, but I'm listening to different speakers or something like that. And there are some folks that will make it seem as though that the Black woman has knocked the Black man off of his throne and set down herself, and will talk about the male-female relationship in context or in relation to Black man versus Black woman, which I've always had a problem with, because one of the things that I think is very interesting is that if we are a team, then whoever can bring home the bacon, if that's what we're bringing home, whoever can bring home the bacon, bring home the bacon. And it's not a negation of somebody else's manhood if it happens to be that her skill set or her acceptance allows her to do something different. So this idea of setting up a combative relationship between men and women is something that has gone on. As a matter of fact, I talked to Dr. Brown about this, and he made it seem like, yeah, he was like, that's just one biblical story, Adam and Eve, and this whole thing. He says, but when we look at all the creation stories, and of course, if you've ever listened to Joseph Campbell, you know that there's more than one creation story. We just happen to, in this United States of America, be exposed to the King James version of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. But if you look at it, there are different creation stories depending upon the culture that you are in, or even the religious ideology that you may be in. Different altogether. So in the creation story that we have here in this country, it was Eve who bit the apple, offered it to Adam, and there went the downfall of man, all at the suggestion of a snake, right? If we look at that symbolically, it expands and grows in context. What is the snake, And if, why was it there, right? Who put it in there? If its job was to deceive, why was the apple so readily available? And would we not make this choice all over again? There's a whole lot of questions, but there was set up this enmity between man and woman that made it seem like woman was the downfall, and it is not. So when you think about even this, as we bring it into the context of a male-female relationship, husband and wife relationship, one and the other, we need to really look at how we set ourselves up against, as opposed to for our families, right? So when we talk about this idea, I want us to, like I was saying before, keep in context the situations that we've lived through, not necessarily something that somebody else has lived through, but that we have lived through. If we look at the situations that our parents and then our grandparents, and they exist in a time and in culture. So this idea of failure, this is how the context, the backdrop, I'll say, that we have to consider when we talk about this. He says, another client of mine, he starts to talk about this. Bart, another client of mine, was the weakest link on the sales team. He made only enough money to scrap by. When I asked him, this is Mark Wolin talking, when I asked him about his father, he explained that his father only had an 8th grade education and had lived a very simple life. When asked what might happen were he to have lots of money, Bart said he feared he would lose the simplicity of life, a virtue that his father extolled. Having money would devalue my life and make my life complicated. Essentials would be lost. Now, have another friend. I got all of these friends. I was at one year I was pushing one of my girlfriend's convertibles. It was just a beautiful car. I've read in books someplace where somebody says everybody ought to own a convertible, like at least for a couple of years in their life. What I noticed about convertibles is convertibles get not only a lot of attention, but people feel as if they are in the car with you when they pull up to the stoplight. So if you are in a convertible, it's nothing for the person to turn and start talking to you as if it is an open invitation for a new friendship. Anyway, I used to drive this convertible from time to time that was my girlfriend's, because she would go, out of town or whatever, like, hey, keep my car, whatever. So these younger days. So this friend of mine, I go up to see him, and I said, come on, let's go for a ride. And he was like, oh no, oh no, you know, I'm not riding around in any flashy car like that. It's like, that is just not him, not his lifestyle, not the way he gets down. Oh no. And so he always called me Sister Sandra too. Sister Sandra, I'm not getting in that car with you. That's not, no, right? You try to no, he is a simple guy, and he likes a simple life. If he could sit up under a tree and chew on a piece of hay all day, that would be his life, but he really pushes back on that. So when this guy is talking about this idea that his father was a very simple man, he says, so listen what he says. He says his father extolled having money would devalue my life and make life complicated. The essentials would be lost. Now, if his father said this often, he can't help but have this plan on the ticker tape in his mind. What do you have planned on the ticker tape in your mind? So Bart's core language boiled down to having money would devalue my life. I would lose track of what's really important. Sometimes we think about, when even the love languages, when you read that book, The Love Languages, how love language is communicated. Some people are out working hard because they believe that that is what they have to do in order to provide for and take care of their family. So they get the message that hard work, which sometimes means that you're absent a lot, and sometimes means you're on the road, you're traveling, all of that stuff, that hard work is how they show love. Another person who believes that touch is an expression for love or a way for that person always being absent would be problematic, because they think that time is love, or they think that touch is love, or they think that acts of service is love, or something like that. So sometimes you are in relation to people where the value or the way you express these things are diametrically opposed. So Bart's core language was having money would devalue my life, meant that he was aligning with or being loyal to this idea that even if I have an opportunity, I need to turn that down, because that would be, I would lose track of what's really real, of what's really valuable. My dad, and I'll tell you this too, my dad grew up in Mississippi, and still to this day, there are a lot of shotgun houses in the South, right? And by shotgun houses, they used to call them that because you could stand at the front door and shoot clear out the back door, because everything was off of one central hall that went all the way back to the thing. But they would have different rooms in the house. Well, my dad was not in a shotgun house. He didn't grow up in a shotgun house, I don't think. But there were 9 of them. They often kind of talk about this, my dad at least, he would talk about the with romantic ideas, everybody living in a one-room house, kind of like you used to see on the Westerns. Everybody, the bed over on this side of the room, or the bedding area, and then the cooking area on the other side. And so he would often say to us, if he could just have all of us, his whole family in a one-room shack, he'd be perfectly happy. I could see everybody. I know what's going on, but that wasn't the case actually. He would my dad, he would love to have us in the house, always wanted to hear us, but he would go in the room and shut the door. And it would just be something about having the noise in the house that was thrilling to him. But, this idea of the simple life, I'm so glad that it wasn't that simple, right? That we all had our own space, our own rooms, all of that stuff. But now what's your core language when it comes down to success or money? What's your core language? And not this to the idea of being about the competition or somebody else. This is what resides in you. What resides in you, right? So it says here that Bart appeared to be emulating his father's values, right? Once he realized that he carried an unconscious loyalty to not become more successful than his father, Bart began to reassess his financial goals. Do you even have goals, right? So once he got out of that loyalty, because a lot of times we don't realize that we don't want to exceed what our parents do. Our parents may raise us with the idea that they want us to exceed them, but we may not want to exceed them. As a matter of fact, not want to move out of the neighborhood or too far, not want to do particular things because it's a value, it's a value that may have been passed on to us. So it became clear to Bart that limiting his success was the opposite of what his father really wanted for him. Bart picked up the pace. Within 8 months, his sales production doubled. So to ask ourselves the questions when it comes down to what this looks like, because that just made me stop and think for a second, like, you know, what is it that I really think about these things? We can all ask ourselves this. Am I afraid of succeeding? Am I afraid of, you know, yeah, just throwing stuff by the wayside? What is the fear? What's the underlying cause behind this? We each have to answer this for ourselves if this is something that you're even curious about. Do you, if exceeding your parents is not the thing, then ask yourself other questions around this. And then as you get closer to the answers, sometimes it'll make you uncomfortable, but in thinking about it, there is a certain level of freedom, because once you come to a realization about what's behind you, what's motivating you, then that just breaks stuff open. So we can be unconsciously bound to other family members beyond our parents and find ourselves inadvertently connected to an aunt, an uncle, a grandparent, or other family members. So remember, I told you that I had a next door neighbor who was really the first woman that I knew that, I mean, when I was growing up, she was the first woman that I had seen that was, that was single and single by choice and lived that life. She was like, I used to call her one of the golden girls, but it was not something that I had been exposed to. I didn't know that it was an option, right? And so even though, everybody in my family that I saw, whether it was my aunts, my uncle, it was like everybody was married. And then here is this lone woman who we live next door to, who was living in a house that was, nice and fancy, beautiful home. She was doing good all on her own. She was footloose and fancy free, didn't have to answer to anybody except for her dogs. It was a different image. So it doesn't necessarily have to be just your family alone that can have that's had an impact on you. Sometimes you got to look or extend that out and see the impact of the messages that we've received from other people we see in our lives. He says that was the case with this other client named Paul. He came to see me after being passed over for promotion time and time again. He says, although it was never mentioned directly to him, his unkept appearance and the fact that his clothes were shabby and dirty may have contributed. You think? I mean, he didn't look the part of a leader. So Paul remembered how embarrassed he was as a small boy by his grandfather, who was the town loser. He and his friends would make fun of his grandfather, who would be found scavenging through garbage cans for food or sleeping afternoons in the town movie theater. Now, as an adult, Paul was repeating aspects of his grandfather's life by dressing like him and reliving his fears. Good googly moogly. Sometimes I draw a total blank on stuff. And so I'm here we go. I'm looking this up. And not that. What is that woman's name? What is her name? What is her name? What is her name? I can see her so clearly in my mind. And the show was not, it's one of Shonda Rhimes things, one of Shonda's Rhimes movies. And, but I'm not looking for Shonda Rhimes. I am looking for, let me see. Because I'm trying to go down a whole nother aisle with you. And why is it not the first thing that I see in here? Because it is one of her more famous shows. Yeah, help me out. What's the woman's name that just wrote the book? And she's on one of Shonda Rhimes' shows, Black woman, and I cannot call her name for anything. Here it is. No, it's not. Okay, so let's see. I'm gonna get this because I tried to call her name the other day and I couldn't. Viola Davis. Dang, I'm gonna write this down on my doily here. Viola Davis. Viola Davis just wrote a book. And in this book, she talks about her upbringing. I mean, and it's heart-wrenching. I haven't read the book. I've seen the interview that she did with Oprah, and it is heart-wrenching. She came up in poverty that was just unbelievable. As a matter of fact, she talked about listening to the rats as they chewed her doll while she laid in bed, and the things that they had to do just to keep the rats off of them, how they went to school smelling like pee. And she talked about all of the stuff that came out of poverty not having water sometimes, not having heat sometimes, not having clean clothes, not being able to, and they went, and she says the choice wasn't to not go to school because sometimes that was the only food or the only meal that they got a chance to eat. So she talked about the heart-wrenching stuff. Now, could you imagine that growing up, you would see these images over and over again? Some people would be loyal to the images that they saw, right? So whether you were seeing people that were bodaciously living their life as a single woman, seeming to have so much fun, or a friend of mine's, I don't want to call her a friend, but a woman that I interviewed back in the day, she had written a book, and she said that one of the things that when she was a girl, they would constantly, her family had to drive through the Euclid corridor in order to get home. And she said she would see all these glamorous women outside that would be wearing sparkly clothes and, or scantily clad and lipstick and eyelashes and all of that stuff. And she said, as a little girl, she says, I want to be like that when I grow up. And so, as it turns out, being like that was being a lady of the night, being a prostitute. But in her mind, all she wanted was the glamour of it and not the other pieces of it. So she grew up and she became a prostitute. And so sometimes we don't realize what it is that we are drawn to, but we are drawn to certain things. And sometimes those things are not always good. It could be that you are living out the life that your grandfather did. You could be of service, right? You believe that your responsibility or your role is to mother or to be of service or to be a housekeeper, or sometimes that is the way that you define a good relationship by having the dinner on the table, or by doing the service oriented stuff, or you might see something different. So for me, what I saw and even the way that I heard was that this thing about women as helpmates, like we didn't have any other identity other than to be a helpmate for a man. And then I saw this woman that lived next door to me, and she was a woman unto herself. And I was more attracted to that than I was to making sure that the dinner was on the table by a certain time. So these unconscious loyalties, sometimes it is what we take on. We could be loyal to our family and our family image, or we could be loyal to the thing that attracts us and calls us, to ourselves. So here, when he was talking about his grandfather digging through trash, his grandfather dressing sloppy, his grandfather, the way that his grandfather looked, his core language became, I'm not good enough, they don't want me. Because he was repeating aspects of his grandfather's life. He had unconsciously, gravitated and heard that message. So we've looked back at family history. Paul's grandfather had been sent to live in an orphanage at the age of 4 when his parents fell on hard times and couldn't provide for him. That was something that people used to do. Or you remember they had different plagues and stuff that went through in the 1920s, the 1930s. They had these plagues, and it would leave children without parents. Or if the parent couldn't take care of the child, they drop them off at an orphanage, right? And so the residuals of that energy can be passed on through the lineage. So Paul now understood that it was his grandfather who was the rightful owner of the feelings of not being wanted and not being good enough. Paul had merely been continuing those feelings. if we look, and sometimes, like I said, it doesn't have to, we don't have to look that far. We can look sometimes just in our family, or we can look at our grandparents, or we can look at certain things and even imagine into it. What might I have thought about this then? Oh my goodness. Um, so recognizing his unconscious connection to his grandfather, Paul was able to break free. He was now able to connect with his grandfather in the compassion he felt for him, instead of having to dress like him. Understanding the identification, Paul immediately began to make healthy choices around his physical appearance. I can just imagine that Paul, if he was with his friends making fun of his own grandfather, I could I can imagine the guilt and the shame that might have even gone into that and that emotional thing. If you had a parent or a grandparent that was living on the street, or that was just like the social outcast, how might that live still in you? Oh my goodness. Just the thought of that. So all of these things are things that we can open ourselves to and consider, you know, when you're talking about your own life, what is it? What is it that drives you? Um I see I see all the time that there is this, sometimes there we got our foot on the brake and on the paddle at the same time. We want to go forward, but there is something that is holding us back. And so just asking questions shakes things loose, right? Just like having the courage to say, what is the possibility around this? And sometimes, I love journaling, but journaling is not for everybody. Sometimes it's just like holding on to an idea, like for me it's like a puzzle, right? And you look at the piece of the puzzle and you're turning around and you're looking at it, and then you want to put it here but it doesn't quite fit, and you want to stick it over here and it doesn't quite fit, and you're trying to put this piece of puzzle into place and it's not quite fitting. And sometimes you got to lay it aside because the perfect fit hasn't come into view yet. So you got to put a couple of more pieces in and then you see how it fits. I mean, this is kind of like a metaphor for all of our lives. You know, if I can't figure this out right at the moment, maybe it's because there's a couple of other pieces that are missing. But holding on to, I know something is wrong, right? Holding on to that idea helps you to see, or helps you to start asking the questions that might be the missing pieces that you need in order to complete your puzzle. I think that this is fabulous and amazing. All of this work is ours to do, right? And this is not about other people. It's not about the estimation of other people, but rather the work that we are doing for ourselves. I mean, I mean, this is, even if you've got people that are depending on you, right? The thing is not to worry about their frustration or their anger, but let me look within, because there might be something that I'm doing, something that I'm holding on to, something that I am not seeing, that I need to crack open and be about the business. There was and I'll tell you this quick story. It's not a story. It's my reality. When I remember when I first started working with the idea of having a prayer group. No, 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 no. I was in a mastermind group. I have been in mastermind groups, and mastermind groups are groups that you get into and your only focus is accomplishing goals. And so you kind of get in and you tell people what your goal is, what your desire is, and then they get in agreement with you. So it's almost like a prayer group for whatever it is that you're working on. So anyway, I had this group, and it started off at a church. But then I wanted, we would get in there, and instead of us doing the mastermind like the mastermind was designed, I could say I wanted something. And rather than people getting an agreement with me, they'll say, well, have you tried? Have you considered? I think you should. And is that what you really want? It was always like, you throw something out and it turned into a wrestling match. And I was like sitting there thinking to myself, like, I just want y'all to agree with me. I didn't want to hear your opinion about what I wanted for myself, because what you want for yourselves inevitably does not jive with what other people want for you. Right. And sometimes I can be guilty of that too, because I'm like, if whatever, I'll call her Terry. If Terry came in on that particular day and her whole thing is I want to lose 100 pounds, I might say, girl, can you just focus on 5? Quit tripping about 100. Right. I was guilty of that because I was like saying, why do we, why bite off a massive goal when 3 is really hard? Why focus in on this big thing if you can't even do 5? Right? It just seems like I would say, oh, you're setting yourself up for failure. So that was what that group looked like at first when I was in the first group. The second group I got into, I thought to myself, these people could really be in a mastermind group, because I thought they were just, doing stuff already. This was going to be so awesome. And I get in there and, business owners and all of this stuff. And I get in and we start doing our mastermind thing. And the first thing that this woman says is I want to make $7 million per year. I was like, what? What? Can you focus on just making 6 figures first, right? Can you just? And so it was so funny to me
because
I went from one group that was, I want to lose 100 pounds, or I want to move out of my mama's house. I want to, I went from that group into a group where, you have $7 million a year. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, so wait a minute. Let's look at where you at right now, right? You ain't even at near the 6 figures yet. You're living in this little place. I was all in my thoughts and my judgments about it. I was of that mindset. And I don't know that I've gotten above and beyond this, but this, taking things like in steps. I often tell people, even when I do prayer work, it's difficult to pray about stuff you can't even imagine at a particular point. It's let's step into that. What I've found is that when I pray for stuff, and I do this often, I pray for stuff, and the setup is what I start seeing, right? So if I'm praying for something, it doesn't all it doesn't all come at once. But what I see is opportunity starting to open up. You know, like, okay, go here, do this, do that. And it's the incremental steps that start to fall into place. And so, for me, I was just trying to like go through the steps. I'm not trying to, I wasn't, you know, help me hit the lotto. I wasn't in that mindset, but I was in the mindset of this idea, and this is my truth, right? Don't judge me, because I was just saying, be realistic about where it is. But I've always gotten into these things. I will be the first to say, pray big prayers. Pray big prayers, right? Pray big prayers. But when you do so, it is calling into, not based on what somebody else is doing or what you've heard or something, but what do you see? And what is that $7 million? I would ask her questions like that. What does that look like? When you get it, what is that going to be? That's what I started asking, because I was like thinking to myself, like, I'm not going to argue with you about whether or not $7 million per year is realistic, right? She wasn't going to get that right in the book, right? That, or whatever it was that she was doing. I was like, what does that look like? What is that? What's the sensation behind that? Let's sit in that energy. If we could just sit in the energy of your desire, right? If you say, Sandra, I want to be married, I want to be in agreement with you. But what does that look like for you? Because a lot of times we don't even have an image in mind, and what I find too is that the images, the picturing is an important component of making our vision possible. Can I see it? Can I imagine it in my mind and then step into it? I'm not trying to here lead a thing in prayer, because I know people, we always argue. It's not even an argument, but we talk about how to get from point A to point B, how to just sit in the awareness that whatever I need, whenever I need it, wherever I need it, for as long as I need it, is always available to me, right? I see in the Bible where he says, go and get as many vessels as you can and pour, right? And pour the oil into the vessel. And as long as she was in the pouring aspect, she was in the, that she would have. And so there's this thing to me about pouring, right? If I show up, if I just show up, I will have all that I need. And so sometimes we just can't even get a vision. We got to work on the vision, what does it feel like? What does it look like? And if you can't get there, it's hard to actually bring it into fruition. So I was just like, can we just work on? So I used to have, in these groups, I would have these kind of like, can we just get a vision? Can we just get a vision? Let me envision this for you. Let me envision just money falling from the sky on you, right? I don't know how much that's going to be. I don't know if it's going to be 7 million or 100,000, but let me just get a vision for that, right? And if you can't even get a vision, if it's not even in you got to sometimes think about what's blocking you. What mentality is blocking you? I got to ask myself that. What mentality is blocking me? Am I not able to say, let there be, And if I do, then what am I saying, let there be to? Am I saying, let there be to, just, a little bit? Or am I saying, for all that is good for my highest and best? These are questions that we wrestle with. They're questions that I wrestle with anyway. And so, Viola Davis has come a long, long way from where she was. And I appreciate her sharing her story, because it helps you to see what she pulls off of when she's acting. Who knows how money sits with her, now? What's her ideas about it? How does that then impact her family? How does that impact the way she moves in the world? For the kids that teased her or that talked about her, how does that make her Does it make her feel or think any particular way towards them? What when we think about these rags to riches stories, whether they've happened in our lives or in the lives of somebody else, is really just kind of sitting in that energy and asking ourselves questions. I will tell y'all this. I have this notion that I should be able to make a lot of money for doing exactly what I love. And exactly what I love doesn't mean that I have to toil, working hard, exerting physical labor, but doing what I love. We should all have, an expansive vision about what we love. You should be able to get paid to do what you love. But if you're not clear on what you love, that makes that vision impossible. Work on the vision. Work on the vision. Work on the vision. Ew. Work on the vision. All right, that's what I got for y'all today. Oh my God, it's almost 9 o'clock. I wasn't even trying to stay on here this long. Y'all, thank you for being here. This has been good for me. As a matter of fact, it gives me some stuff that I want to think about. It is, I got to sit with some of these ideas even now and think about what I think about, right? I think that that's a powerful space to be in. So think about what I think about and then jot it down and just sit in that energy. I, and this is not me asking you what your truth is. It's you discovering for yourself what your truth is, and then write that down. Right, write it down. Okay, so it is a holiday weekend, is it not? Yay! So, but I'll be here. I'm gonna be here. So I'll be here in the morning. Yeah, y'all may not be, but I have a commitment. Let me think about that, right? Do I want to show up on Monday? Let me think about that. All right. So, but whatever the rate, whatever the case may be, I'll be here tomorrow night. So, I mean, tomorrow morning, tomorrow morning. So I hope you have a fabulous, fabulous day. This Friday, and and I'll see you then. Blessings to you, blessings to each and every one of you. But think about these things and think on these things, right? Yes, and yeah, blessings to you. Happy Friday, Tracy, darling. Yeah. So yeah, here we go. I'm off of here. I'll see y'all tomorrow if you're here. God willing, and the creek don't rise, I'll be here tomorrow. All right. So blessings to you. Deborah. Hey. Okay. Have a safe and prosperous weekend too. I see money dripping down over all of y'all. And hey, I like to say, contribute where you get your blessings. My Cash App address is always up in the description up there. So yeah, blessings to you anyway. I see it falling down. So if you get some unexpected blessings, yeah, hit me up. All right, thought I'd put that out there. Yes.